everyone, and welcome to the Daily Dose. Today we're going to talk a little bit about anger. Today our topic is from lashing out to love. So I want to tell you something about myself, my biggest pet peeve. I'm sure all of you have pet peeves out there, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about mine. My biggest pet peeve is when people don't use cruise control on the interstate. I know it sounds silly, but it really gets to me. You see, in my previous job as a program director at a Bible camp, I spent a lot of time on the road, especially on the interstate, visiting a variety of churches and especially a variety of universities and colleges where I would recruit young people. And because I spent so much time on the road, I found myself finding out my own favorite rules of the road, right? So having cruise control at this speed and making sure to pass when you're this far behind and things that just worked well for everybody. Well, when people didn't subscribe to my rules of the road, I would get really angry. And in fact, I still do. It's just my biggest pet peeve when you're on the interstate and you approach someone that's not going as fast as you, so then you try to pass them, but then they speed up. And it's like they're trying to get in your way, when in actuality, if they're not using cruise control, they probably don't notice that they're speeding up. You see, but it really gets to me. It really gets to me, and it just wells up inside me, this anger that I feel. Maybe some of you have different pet peeves, or maybe some of you have my same pet peeve. I'm not sure. One of my sister's biggest pet peeves is when people are snoring when she's trying to sleep. You see, her husband was a big snorer. She would get so angry in the middle of the night. It was like he was taunting her that he was asleep and that she wasn't. Eventually, he was diagnosed with sleep apnea, so he got a sleep apnea machine, and that solved all of the problems of the snoring. When we feel anger, we feel this wave come up within us. It swells up. We all know what that feeling of anger is like. And sometimes it's little, like a pet peeve or something that just irks you. And of course, sometimes there's bigger waves of anger that is justified in a bigger way. Like the fact that there are people on this planet that don't have enough to eat or don't have access to clean water. I feel angry about that. Or there's other types of anger, like babies that die before they're born. I feel angry about that. And yet, with all of this anger that we feel swells up inside of us, it's like, what do we do with that? What do we do with that? Because we know that when anger takes over our bodies, it's not a good thing. You know, the emotion of anger has its place, right? It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel angry. But when it takes over our whole being, we know that dangerous things can happen. Anger can take over our body, and it can present itself in violence or really dangerous behaviors. People punch through walls or worse, hurt their neighbors in anger. So we know we need to be careful with this emotion, anger. So what do we do? And here's the thing is that right now I think that people have more reason to be angry than ever before. I think there's this underbelly of anger at this pandemic, of the pandemic itself. We're angry that it happened, but we're also angry with people that don't see the pandemic the way we see it, you know? Or just politics today, or the media today stirs up all kinds of anger. And the writers of the Proverbs in the Bible, they have this great verse that talks about anger. It's chapter 30, verse 33, and it says this: "For as churning cream produces butter, and as twisting the nose produces blood, so stirring up anger produces strife." What the writers are saying here is that when we give attention to anger, we manifest anger. When we stir up anger, when we give credence to our anger, when we let anger take over, it creates something even worse. It can create strife. It can create fighting. It can create violence. We know this, and the writers of the Bible know this. So when Jesus came, he came to say something about anger. He came to say something because he knows it's not good for us and it's not good for our neighbors when anger takes over our bodies. So what does Jesus say? Well, overwhelmingly in the Gospels, Jesus says over and over that love is the most important thing. That we need to go from lashing out to love. He says this over and over in Scripture, that love is the most important thing, loving God and loving our neighbors. And so there is anger in the world. It's a perfectly fine emotion. But anger needs to be tempered with this love. When we're angry with someone, we need to remember that we're also called to love that person. Doesn't mean that we're unjustified in our anger. Maybe it is justified that we're angry with that person. But it needs to be held with the fact that we love them. When I think about it this way, I'm a mom of a toddler, and believe me, that toddler has learned how to push my buttons, all kinds of buttons. With my toddler, when he pushes those buttons, I remember how to speak to him. Even though I'm angry and I feel the anger welling up inside me, I remember to speak to him in love because I love him. And it's easy for me to remember that I love him. So I speak to him kindly and I speak to him lovingly. And I remember that I love him more than what he has done to make me angry. It's so much harder when it's someone across a computer screen or someone in a car next to you on the interstate. It's hard to remember that we're also called to love those people when they're not so close to us in our lives. And yet, we are. We are called to love our neighbors. So anger is an emotion. It's an emotion that we all have had. It's an emotion that we'll continue to have. But we need to remember to always have love at the center, to make sure that we don't separate the two, that we always remember to hold love with it. Thanks for joining us on the Daily Dose today. We're so glad you could tune in. If you're watching on Facebook, you could like and share this video. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to stay in tune with what we're doing. And if you're watching on cable access, it was really great to have you here, and we hope to see you again.